and the ancestors are looking out for us. God Hayes is exposing them, man.
Okay, you see that chair right there? See how big it is?
Yeah.
Now look at the Pope chair under it. Scroll down, look at the Pope chair under
Never have it been made so clear.
Young TV. Young.
We running the game right now.
Young TV.
Time to take over.
Young TV.
We the hottest in the game. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you just not tuned in.
TV.
Share, like on your Instagram, Facebook.
Young TV.
If you tuned in, we broadcasting live from 2030, baby.
Young TV. Young
Taking over the game, baby. Oh yeah.
Young TV.
Hit that like.
Young TV.
Get them likes up in the air, you heard me?
Young TV.
Ride by. Hotel Islam.
Young TV.
Assalamu alaikum. Flown lesson.
Young TV.
Hello?
Rahobat.
Rahobat. Maku Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle, we left off at discussing the plea agreements.
Yes.
Now, within these plea agreements that you were tortured into taking,
Right.
was the 476 acres of land, and I think I also heard of an exuberant amount of money that was taken during the raids.
Right.
Were those all mentioned in this plea agreement?
I never got a chance to read the plea agreement. That was the whole thing. They kept me under the pressure and scrutiny of their psychiatrist over the whole night. And then took me back to the cell around 4 or 5, and then called me back out at 6 before I could even get back to get to sleep. And then started with the plea agreement. I never read the papers. I never knew nothing about the papers, like the PSR or PSI, whatever they call it. I didn't know anything about none of that stuff. They had already had this thing planned. I noticed when they did jump down on those people's land, and the land was verified as theirs and not mine by a judge in Putnam County, I think Hugh Winfield, right? They did take an exuberant amount of money from them. I know when they went into my house in 55 Mansfield in Athens County, Athens, Georgia, Clark County, where I live, where I'm registered, they took money out of my private money out of my house, which is legal.
Right.
You follow? I know they didn't find no weapons. They didn't find nothing that would implement me. And if they did find anything in my house, then it was put in there by Abigail Washington, who was taking care of that house.
So you are registered to vote, and your legal residence is Athens, Clark County?
Clark County. I'm registered to vote. I voted in Clark County. I'm registered when I purchased that house at 155 Mansfield. They asked me my nationality. I made it clear then I was a Native American. It wasn't something I came up with overnight.
Right. And in going on, just moving forward within this time period, that was January 24th of 2002 that that you were tortured and they're taking these plea agreements. Now, you were imprisoned all the way up and currently still incarcerated, all the way up until May 29th was a sentencing date?
Yes.
Now, at that point in time, were you given any indication or anything going on with your case from any of your attorneys between January 24th?
I wasn't getting no communication from the Garland firm. Every now and then they would send a little guy in called Charles, or you know what I'm saying, and he would actually discuss the Bible and history with me. Nothing to do with doctrine. He was trying to get those guys. He would not even go into anything with the case. Garland made it clear that he didn't think he could beat this case, and I was like, it's time to get rid of him. After he had taken $1.5 million from our tribe, he was ready to sign over an agreement, which his firm is known for, selling agreements and selling people out. I told him from day one, I did not trust him. Then the judge tried to claim the other day that this is some new idea and proven, but that was proven false the following day by Mr. Rob Peaches in his own article, where he states very clearly that Malachi told the psychiatrist way back that he did not trust Garland. He said he was working with SEALs. So if that's true, then the letter I issued to the judge the other morning downstairs in a private meeting, because he didn't want to hear it in the public because he was afraid of its implications, that he made his own personal assumption that this is something I feel you did. There's a ploy you're doing
On May 28th, that is when I was reading in the articles that a meeting had taken place between the judge, the Garland firm, and the prosecution. Now, were you present at that meeting?
I was not, but I found out later I was supposed to have been, but I was not present. He went on and moved and with I think a plea agreement, a whole bunch of different things I didn't know nothing about. All I knew is they were telling me, you're going to plead guilty so you can get these people out and you'll be able to get to your medication. You'll be put in a nice facility as an old man where you can, you'll still be able to write your books and do the things you do. But those people, those young women and Kathy Johnson will be free. It'll all be over with. No details were given to me about anything. I'd never been into the situation before. I never understood what was going on about this here case. So I didn't understand how the federal system works. I didn't understand about pleas. I didn't understand about none of this stuff, about what they call conspiracies and all that kind of stuff. Let alone RICO and all these all new words. That's only television terms to me.
Right. Now, in that meeting, it was brought to my attention that the prosecution was wanting to drop 3 charges, just to get the plea.
Right. That's what I heard. They was going to drop the charges. Now, so they came to the court with the intent to drop the charges. Mr. Lawson didn't want that to happen because Mr. Lawson, of course, working with the system also was trying to prevent the indigenous status, and they want to take those and lock, of course, me away as an orphan, block the doctrine I propagate forever. So they blocked Mr. Moultrie and Mr. Wood, who was there, from put into the court, put before the court that they must respond to it, and they would just actually ignore motions like they never existed. In some motions, they actually transform the motion from one name and put the U.S. government on it so they can hide the motion that was pointing out that Mr. Moultrie and them had to present if they had any more intention of sabotaging or what they call ambushing, they're going to have any more charges, there's any more things, and they hid that there. And to this day, it wouldn't address it. And to the other day, Metro Court was brought up again by Mr. Patrick Adams, a new attorney on the case, and they're avoiding it. They avoid jurisdiction, they avoid the most important issues while they're pursuing their own endeavor, their own quest, I should say, to try to overthrow a tribe.
Right. Now,
Georgia is one of the few states that won't recognize Native Americans or American Indians. Every other state in the doggone country has recognized them. Georgia's fighting with everything they can to keep this as a Confederate state.
Because I noticed that you've been incarcerated for over 2 years now.
That's right.
And the trial is just now coming up to this January 5th, this hearing, or the January 5th trial date. Now, up until that time period, even going into New York, you were sent to New York for a competency evaluation.
Yes.
But in reading the rules that they used in regards to that, it was a rule that the prosecution usually uses.
Yes.
And basically, when you went to New York, what type of treatment were you met with there?
Well, I was put in what they call 9 South first, which I thought was orientation. Now, I came in the day of the blackout, so the whole prison was shut down. Right?
Right.
I came with a bunch of inmates. They had us locked in a dark room where nobody could even see each other, so anything could happen to anybody. Because the whole New York City was out.
Right.
Then they kept us there overnight. They gave us a sandwich. They couldn't even let us fill out the paperwork that night because there was no light. Eventually some generators came on. I don't know what fun it was. And they started bringing us out one by one. The doctors was asking us questions about our medical condition. All right, that's when they noticed my breathing condition and added back on my childhood asthma was added back on, a condition brought out because of the conditions I was in. No air, locked down there in New York in a tomb with no lights and no circulation. We couldn't breathe, so that made me have that breathing problem again. Now I'm back on with asthma medicine, right? I was put in a cell in 9 South with a Latino guy who's already been found guilty, right? I can't say he's a cruel person, no problem. We talked and go. But the place was filthy, rats were there, holes in the wall. I spoke to a man, I can't think his name. He's supposed to be the counselor there. A little short Puerto Rican man. He laughs. He thinks it's funny, the condition. We say there's rats in there. Yeah, well, everybody knows rats in New York. There's water, but this place is filthy. There's mildew in the wall. It's just dangerous. Well, everybody knows that. It's okay. So that went on for a while. They kept me down there. I can't remember exactly. Like I say, they knock out your days and nights by putting you in the corners and places where you can't see. And then from there, all of a sudden, out of the blue sky, they put an Arab in my cell from Morocco. Some Arab guy. They know in my records it says that me and Arabs don't that I've written. You follow? So they endangered my life by putting a Moroccan in my cell. Then within 2 days, they saw there was no violence going to happen there. They transferred me up to 10 South where they have all the terrorists at. Right? They take me there, they say don't say nothing, don't question us, don't look at us, don't say nothing to us, and just throw you in a cell. And that's it. Some Caucasian guy comes back there and says you don't talk to no other officers, you only talk
speaking of MCC New York, that's not the first facility where you were kept in conditions where you were separated and alone.
No, I was locked down in Jonesboro County in a medical cell, which was set up for people with tuberculosis, and the temperature was like 107 degrees all the time. Couldn't breathe. 2 doors locked in. By myself, no windows, no nothing. Only time I ever seen anything is every now and then a person would come by, a nurse or something. And a couple of officers there, and they would stop and they would come in and say, "This room is too hot." But they'd open the door and say, "This room is too hot." And a couple of officers would crack the second door so I could breathe, and the other officers would come and close the door. Then I was allowed to get out because I guess I passed out because they came through, and I found myself, they took me to a day room, which is not very big, about 10 by 10, and in that day room there's about 5 other guys. But I know these guys are very sickly looking, only to find out after talking to a couple of them, they were AIDS and tuberculosis patients. Locked in the same room, we used the same one telephone on the wall. I had no choice to use that telephone to take the chance, or not get it. So I had to go to the phone. That's why I made some contact with outside, let them know what's going on. It was what happened to me in Jonesboro, which was Creighton County. Then, of course, I was bounced over to Putnam County from there. Anytime I would raise any question, I'd be bounced to a lower and lower and lower condition, and more suffering and more torture. Abuse, pushing, shoving, cursing at you, calling your names. Who the heck you think you are? You ain't nothing. You have a whole bunch of vulgarities and all kinds of different things. You ain't nobody. You're just like any other nigga to us, you know, stuff like that.
Now, throughout this incarceration, you've been held at about, from what you've stated today, about 5 or 6 locations.
About 5 or 6, yeah. And they still bounce me. Get ready to bounce me to another one now, to Brunswick. In the judge's environment, where he went to school and he practiced for 20 years. He's pulling a jury of his peers, because they know by now that we have all the facts and they have no evidence. And they know we're about ready to beat this case, so now they're trying to put a curveball in this situation and hoodwink the public so the public won't know what's really going on. That's why they're trying to close the court. Because they thought they had me dead to right, and all that stuff they printed back in May was right, all that filth and all that stuff was true, and all the witnesses and all that there, they would warn on television. Don't tell me that this would be one of the greatest shows they have in the public. Right now with the Michael Jackson case going on too, and the Pope's things just came back on, the Catholic ministers too, this would be a beautiful one. Why would they want to hide this one? And don't tell me they're trying to protect no children, because there's no children in the case. Everybody in this case is over 18 years old. And the other 2 they said was under 18 were excused, and they was already verified as not having been molested when those other 5 kids was released. The doctors said these kids had not been molested. So that's what he's calling 2 kids underage. The other time he lies and speaks about a girl, and Mochi keeps getting up and lying to the judge, telling me that girl was 13 when we got our birth certificate and verified she was 14. It's outright lies. It's a conspiracy to try to destroy our tribe, take our land, and block our jurisdictional rights.
Right, and now throughout all that, throughout all the torture that you've been put through and things of that nature, now you're leading up to the court case, and it just seems from what I'm reading in the public is that they're trying to violate your constitutional rights by allotting you a fair trial.
That's right.
And that's what this Judge C. Ashley Royal wanting to close the courtroom.
That's right. That's
what is that about?
Knock away my First Amendment right, my 6th Amendment right, my 5th Amendment right, and I think my 14th Amendment right. He's just trying to close the trial because he don't want the public to hear this trial. He's lying. He's saying he's doing it to protect the children, but there's no children in the case. So that can't be the real reason. So now, you know what I mean, what is the real reason? To keep the public from hearing the truth. When we start presenting the videotapes we got, the pictures we got of these kids in their real nature, the fact, the letters we got, the actual witnesses we got who made affidavit response, who was raised with them, who hung out with them, not the 4 people they're talking about, or the 5 people they're talking about, but another 50 other people who was there, their mothers, their own mothers and fathers, their own brothers and sisters, who is willing to testify that these kids is a plot for money. People who was a part of the meeting when they had the plot plan, went to Florida with them, how Jake and them transported mines across the state line from Georgia, bringing them down to Florida just to set up the plot. They're trying to hide all these facts, and the judge was helping because it's an embarrassment to the state of Georgia that went through all of this to find out everything they was doing was a lie. It was all a big plot. They got tricked by a bunch of kids. But they're calling kids, of course, most of them in their 30s now, but they're calling them kids. It's embarrassment, so they'd rather let me fall and you know what I'm saying? Right. And save their butts. And we're not having it. That's why we're public. That's why it's on the internet. It's called www.unnm.com and get the facts. Go up there or go to gopetition.com and go there and you see the facts is up there.
Right. Now you speak of the different things that have taken place throughout this whole entire time period. What do you think has led it to this point, and do you think the new RICO charges are an act to basically or punish you for wanting to use your Fifth Amendment right?
The RICO charges is because they realized that I did not own the property in Putnam County, and that the judge, Hugh Winfield, money and keep the land, and it's a way of chastising me for having the audacity to fight them back.
Right. And you in fact retired in 1988. Is that correct?
And Abigail Washington's father, Nathaniel Washington, became the president or leader of that organization. From then on, the vice president became Vincent Powell, and then secretary became somebody named in it.
Now, you've been, you're speaking, these are legal organizations that you're talking about.
Oh, that was the Nubian Islamic Hebrews Ansar Law Committee, incorporated way back in Brooklyn, yes. I retired in 1988. I'm going about my business. And I formed the Egyptian Church of Crest. I went back into the Masonic Lodge and set up a doctrine from there.
Of course, I want to begin with, he's innocent. In his case, there's no video evidence, no audio evidence, no DNA evidence that supports anything that he's been accused of. And it's a joy for all of us, as my brothers have already addressed. We haven't really gotten out and laid out the facts and the receipts on this case. It hasn't been because we have not had them, but it was for waiting for when the time was right. So everyone should see the MO that they've used on the master teacher 1,000 miles away if you know the history of our people. So we welcome all our family who are watching, our Sabian family, Moorish Science Temple family, NOI family. If we have Hebrew Israelite family, Christian, Jewish, whatever your thing is melanated people, we family. And we would hope that you would understand and resonate what we're presenting about the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z York, on this platform. When you go into the transcripts, you will see numerous contradictions across the transcripts. So within this case, you have statements called 302s that were collected by the federal government about the alleged victims in this case. And then you have the testimony of these so-called victims in this case. When you do have some of the people who were actually included in those 302s in the indictment against Dr. York and were charged, said nothing happened. So what is happening is by hiding the transcript, it hides from the public all the contradictions in the stories that were put forth by the conspirators who were behind this, Jacob York and Nicole Ada Lopez. It began with Jacob York. What happened with Jacob York, and let's make a correction, his name is actually Yaqub Abdullah Muhammad. It's so ironic that he has this venom and has this conspiracy against Dr. York, but he has leveraged Dr. York's name to his advantage in the music business. Right. But his name is Yaqub Abdullah Muhammad. The source of his venom, by many of accounts, is one, his spoiled and entitled nature. He is someone who is delusional and has this unfound anger rooted at Dr. York, because in his mind, Dr. York had something to do with the death of his mother, peace be upon her, Dorothy Johnson, of an aneurysm. However, when you look at his mother's family, her brother died of an aneurysm. I believe her father also died of an aneurysm. So it stands to reason this was something genetic in their family. It had nothing to do with Dr. York. Another reason that he had a lot of rage against Dr. York is if you look, anyone who knows the music business, Jacob York was part of bringing Little Kim forth. Mm-hmm. And so he went to his father to get support for the finances of Little Kim, who brought in pornographic rap, which is an image that goes against everything Dr. York is as a person, the culture that he represents. He's brought to us that who we are as a people. And he said no. And when he said no, he began basically stomping and having a temper tantrum. And I'm bringing this story not because I was there, but if you listen to the Isles of Patmos CD that Dr. York recorded in the Belly of the Beast in 2004, he gives an account of this interaction. So basically when he said no, he started stomping, cursing, sped off the land. And I believe amongst us, we have people who were there when that part of it happened. And that started the root of the conspiracy that he constructed along with Nicole Ada Lopez, who is the true molester in this case, who was 24 years old, having a physical, intimate relationship with a 14-year-old. And we have the receipts on that. Yeah, and that's actually, I don't mean to cut your wisdom, sister, but that is actually documented. And one of the part of the story, and I actually remember that part of the story, was she would basically contribute to this bringing down
Dr. York, and she would basically not be held accountable for her indiscretions. And I mean,
let's be straight up. She's favorable in concessions. She's an informant. So what people have to understand in this case, a lot of people behind this case have criminal backgrounds, including Jake York. He's the molester. He was being investigated for tax evasion as a result of a lawsuit that was launched against him by the NBA because of the sex, drugs, and violence. He took the NBA symbol. I don't know, people from New York. Cameron had an album called Sex, Drugs, and Entertainment. I'm sorry.
Right.
And he used the NBA symbol, but the guy had a gun in his hand. And the NBA sued him for misuse of that symbol. So he had a lot of layers of criminal activity, including check fraud and doctoring bank documents to get house. I mean, this guy is a criminal. See, the irony of this whole case is when you look at the co-conspirators, the true co-conspirators, who's Jake York and Nicole Lopez, and then Sheriff Howard Richard Sills in Putnam County, which is where the land comes in, and we'll get there. They are the criminals. These are people who are committing crimes and then pointing the finger at Dr. York for crimes he did not commit. So criminals look for favorable concessions. They look to be informants. They look to get immunity. And so numerous people in this case got immunity in exchange for testifying against Dr. York, which we have the receipts for. So the root of that has nothing to do with any of the allegations. It is his personal vendetta that he executed with Nicole Lopez, put people in a position, other members who were disgruntled in the community, took advantage of their disgruntled nature, put them in a position where they felt forced to go along with it, or they would get prosecuted with the FBI, and created lies. And we have, the conspiracy is showing itself because we have numerous recantments. We have numerous video affidavits of people saying they were approached by Jake York. Let's make up some lies to bring him down. How much he hated his father, them not wanting to do it, him being persuasive, and then saying, oh, well, the FBI has something on you, so you better go along with it.
So the word is that Dr. York was convicted of molestation and sex trafficking or child trafficking and all that. But when you look at the case, you really don't see that. Could you explain exactly what he was convicted of and how he was convicted?
Dr. York wasn't convicted of child molestation. What has happened is the press has put forward the state case, which is now dead docketed, and that has nothing to do with the federal case, which are the charges that Dr. York is being wrongfully detained for. Molestation is not in the federal. And so that has been conflagrated over the years, and that's where the confusion comes from. Not only do we have several people who said nothing happened that were using the indictment against Dr. York. That is not what happened in the federal. And there's a whole link between the state case and the federal case that we may get to of how one case was used in the other.
Then when you start getting into the transcripts, then you start finding out, and that's why this is so important. And I see people in the chat talking about there's a narrative that, they've heard this before, but no, they haven't, because no one has shown like these transcripts. Like, first of all, Jelaine Ward, the initial investigating FBI agent at one of the arraignment hearings, at the bond hearing, told the court that she had no evidence connecting Dr. York with, because one of the charges, which they'll go into, I think I just saw the screen being shared, was, transporting children across state lines for the intent. And they were asked, do you have evidence proving that? And she said, no, this is on the transcripts. This is on the transcripts. Another one, I just want to Tariq, is it right? Is that one of the guys that's been going around saying
one of the accused?
Initially his intake form from DFACS, which is, their, family and children's services in the state of Georgia, right? I guess they got DIFAS up north. It's DFACS in the South. It says abuse denied. This is what his intake form says. You follow what I'm talking about? But people don't notice because they didn't have access to the transcripts, because remember, they sealed the transcripts. The transcripts weren't even able to be, what's it called, or us to be able to get public access until 2009, where we were able to get a redacted version of it, because remember, there's alleged children involved. But now let's go into that. There were no children in this case at the time of Dr. York's arrest. The 5 children of the 13 that they alleged that Dr. York had quote unquote molested, the 5 children were taken into de facto custody, then rewarded back to their parents because there were no traces or signs of abuse. And this was during Judge Spivey in that district made that decision and awarded the children back to the parents. And guess what? Those same children are on his indictment and part of his sentencing. So these are the different pieces that no one has seen before, and this is why we're excited to be able to finally show this. Yep. And I'll yield there.
Yeah, what I want to say is that a lot of people have to really realize what we're showing is not Photoshop documents. These are transcripts, receipts that are being shown to show you as evidence that this was a kangaroo court, that Dr. York got railroaded, that this is the situation, just like the gentleman that just left got released after 34 years in Florida. This thing happens all the time. So it's like, even after they see this, after they hear it, it always go back to they just sweep it under the rug that Dr. York is guilty. So this is very important that y'all pay attention to what's about to be shown right now. This is very, very important. I yield.
So when you're looking at these counts, you're looking at RICO counts. There's a Mann Act count and Mann Act forfeiture counts. What's very important to understand about the RICO is that the RICO charge was added because the initial allegations against Dr. York, the false allegations, had run their course in terms of the statute of limitations. So what they did in the superseding indictments, they added the RICO so they could stretch back and use the false charges outside the window of the statute of limitations. So the question one has to ask is, this is racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations charge. This is something that was designed for the mafia. This is something that is about a criminal enterprise, but there was no evidence of a criminal enterprise happening. Also, when you look at these counts against Dr. York and Kathy Johnson York, in count 1, you see interstate commerce with intent. When you open up the transcripts, you will see there's no proof of intent for the interstate commerce. The acts that they presented, there was no proof of any intent of interstate commerce. What they are using, and I know one of our brothers can speak on this, is the movement of then members of the community from upstate New York down to Georgia. In that trip, Dr. York did not travel with children with the intent for commerce. He traveled with his biological children. He was not in the first group to come down. And if, Brother Seneb, if you could speak more about that transition from Sullivan County down to Georgia, because they're trying to use that to justify this particular count, and that's not accurate.
Brother Seneb there?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Somebody was asking about the guilty plea. First and foremost, one thing people don't know is that Dr. York initially, May 9th, 2002, pled not guilty. This is all on the record. This is Atlanta Journal-Constitution, so on and so forth. So his initial plea was not guilty. So now, after a year and a half of being tortured, not being able to see his attorneys, then, and everybody's seen the video online, everybody's seen the shape the brother was in. People see that. Then you see the guilty plea. Now, one thing no one ever talks about is that 97% of all federal cases end in a guilty, they are plead out. That's a fact. You can look up the Pew Foundation research agency, right? And I'll drop the link in the chat as well. So only 3% of federal cases go to trial. 97% end in a plea. Now, also remember, he didn't get 135 years because he pled guilty. He got 135 years because when he did finally have an attorney that he agreed that could actually fight the case for him, he withdrew the not guilty plea. I'm sorry, the guilty plea. I'm sorry, he withdrew the guilty plea, then pled not guilty, and then went in and fought the case. And what the government did, what the state did, was they wanted to taint, because remember, the jury, it was hard to find a jury that didn't know about the case, to find an unbiased jury. So the decision was made to move the case from out of the district of where it was, which was, I think, the 11th Circuit, and then moved into Savannah's area, where the Judge Ashley C. Royal, where he comes out of, that area where he's from, which is Brunswick, Georgia. And then when the case was moved there, the state and the feds released the video unlawfully of Dr. York's plea to taint the jury in that area prior to that jury being selected.
So are you saying that the guilty plea had no bearing on this case? Because it's the public perception that the guilty plea was the end all be all in that video where clearly he looks under the influence, or something is going on. Let me just say that something's going on.
Definitely under duress.
Yeah, something is going on. With that being said, did that guilty plea have any bearing on the outcome, or it was actually thrown out?
But that's the whole point, is that the guilty plea was put out to the masses to influence the jury pool. So this is another interesting point of the case, is that we know that when a case of this magnitude is brought before a person is charged with these types of charges, they usually go to a grand jury, right? And so the reason why the case was moved from the Macon area to Brunswick, Georgia, is because they determined that in Macon, because of all the negative publicity, that Macon itself was a tainted jury pool. And being a tainted jury pool, they moved it from Macon to Brunswick. But at the same time, they selected the grand jury, who is the one who decides whether the prosecution has enough evidence for the case to proceed with criminal charges. The grand jury was pulled from that same jury pool that they determined was tainted. So there was a lot of bias in terms of Dr. York's case, and that video being released was part of that. They wanted to influence people to sway them into that, to convicting Dr. York. But still, going to the facts of the case, there was definitely enough evidence presented to show reasonable doubt. The prosecution definitely did not show without a shadow of a doubt that Dr. York was guilty, because there's so many holes in the story, so many discrepancies. And one of the main things that we actually have, where a doctor who was a part of our medical association, who independently examined the evidence, and him being a OBGYN, Dr. Bright, who was very familiar with what happens from molestation, from sexual intercourse, from normal sexual intercourse to forced sexual intercourse. He's very familiar with what happens during that time. And so in his examination of the evidence, he made a video affidavit. And in that video affidavit, he coined what is called the consistent inconsistencies. And basically what he said, if a person shows that they've had sexual intercourse, or there is some scarring, or things of the nature, that is consistent with molestation. And when people were examined and there were no signs of any scarring, any sexual intercourse, the prosecution also said that was consistent with molestation. And so these were the types of things that Dr. York was faced against, which made it very difficult to defend. You can't defend if you say, hey, this person has evidence of having sexual intercourse, this person doesn't, but they both are consistent with molestation. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, those individuals, Jacob York as well as Nicole Ada Lopez, are themselves being investigated because not only they are the ones who are responsible for bringing this forward. If anybody remembers, there was a Discover ID program in which Nicole Lopez was on. And one of the things that the sheriff who was responsible for this case, Sheriff Howard Richard Seals, one of the things he revealed, even contrary to what Jacob York, because there's plenty of videos where he explains, hey, I had nothing to do with this case. If I was a part of this case, I would have been brought to the witness stand, things so on and so forth. But we know, based on the case, that Jacob York was definitely a part of this conspiracy. And one thing that Sheriff Richard Seals revealed was that they didn't have a case until Jacob York came forward to Sheriff Richard Seals. And this was right after they had this whole trip in South Beach, Florida, where the whole conspiracy was put together. And Jacob York even documents this whole trip himself. We have the video of that. So, yes, there's efforts being made to free Dr. York, and it will happen.
May I just add one point on that conspiracy aspect? Once again, those who are pointing the finger are committing the crime. So the charge of transporting with intent to engage in illegal commerce that has been launched against Dr. York, that's actually what Jacob York was doing in a trip to South Beach. He basically took underage girls across state lines from Georgia to Florida, engaged in sexual intercourse with numerous people having intercourse with underage girls. And this was all part of forming the conspiracy, because on this trip in 2001 to Florida, to Sheridan Bell Harbor, that was the car trip back and forth where these individuals were targeted due to being disgruntled towards Dr. York, their issues and displeasures with the disciplined cultural way of life that was being maintained on Tamaray, and feeling forced because of many of them, their families, even their mothers, facing criminal charges possibly, to collaborate on this false ruse that they launched against Dr. York. So when we're really talking about RICO, we need to be talking about Jacob York. When we're talking about transporting with the intent to engage in interstate commerce, we need to be talking about Jacob York, not Dr. Malachi Z York.
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in. This series is to be continued. Now we're running a 10K fundraiser for the master teacher. We're trying to raise $10,000 by June 26th, which is the master teacher's birthday, right? If you want to help us out on that, what you would do is you would cash out Uma, the master teacher's daughter, right, at Uma's York LLC, right? And keep in mind, we working to get the master teacher out, and we need a couple funds to make a couple plays, right, on getting certain things pushed through and moved around, and certain travel expenses to go and get certain things filed. So if you want to help us out and you got love for the master teacher, man, show us some love.